On my son's birthday, I arrived early, picked up the cake, paid for the table, even ironed my old navy blazer. It wasn't much, but I wore it every year. It still smelled like the first time I held him at the hospital. They all arrived late, loud, dressed like the world owed them applause. My son's new friends, the ones who called me old man when they thought I wasn't listening. The waitress smiled at me gently. They said you'd be covering the bill, sir. I nodded. That was always the deal. I didn't mind. Until the jokes started. Yo, check the way he chews. Like someone's grandpa from a silent movie. One of them laughed. I am someone's grandpa, I said with a small smile. Oh, relax, another snorted. If you can't take a joke, maybe just pay the tab and get lost. That's when my son turned toward me, smirked, and said the words that cracked something I didn't know could break. Yeah, Dad, if you don't like the jokes, you can just pay and get lost. My name is Walter Grady, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because here's the thing. Have you ever spent your life giving everything to someone, only to realize they were never saving a seat for you at their table? That night, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say a word, but I reached into my wallet, slipped something under the folded napkin, and stood up. The laughter kept going, echoing behind me as I walked out into the parking lot, the street lamp flickering overhead. But they didn't know what I'd done. Not yet. Because the truth? I only paid for one meal. Mine. And they were about to learn what happens when you treat the man who built the foundation like he's just in the way. It took them 7 minutes to notice I was gone. The waiter came back with the check, plates half eaten, wine half poured. Who's covering the rest? He asked. They looked around, smugness fading. One friend laughed nervously. Didn't the old guy pay? Another flipped the napkin I left behind. Nothing but a receipt. For one person. $28.95. My son's face dropped. I was already home by then, sitting in my recliner with the lights off, listening to the rain tick against the windows. I didn't feel triumphant. Just tired. Like a man who finally stopped trying to squeeze into a place that was never made for him. The phone buzzed. For missed calls. Then a text. What the hell, Dad? I didn't answer. Because that night, I wanted silence more than explanations. You see, people assume fathers will always return. That no matter how deep the insult, how loud the room gets, how invisible you make them feel, they'll show up again next year with a smile and the bill. But what they don't realize is, every man has a quiet limit. And I just met mine. The next morning, I canceled the dinner reservation for Thanksgiving. Then Christmas brunch. I had made all those bookings months ago out of habit, out of hope. But not anymore. This time, they could eat without the man they laughed at. Without the man who brought the chairs and still wasn't offered a seat. I wasn't angry. I was done. Let them figure out what absence really tastes like. Because sometimes, the strongest statement a man can make is to leave the room and not come back when they call. And while they scrambled to split a bill that was never meant for them, I was already planning something else. Something bigger. Something they'd never see coming. A week passed. No apology. Just a short text from my son. You kinda overreacted. Everyone was just having fun. That's when I realized something deep. Something that sat heavy on my chest. He didn't see me as a father anymore. Just a placeholder. A name on a bill. A chair filler at his celebrations. I spent the next few days sorting through old photo albums. Pictures of him in a plastic pool. His graduation day. Me holding him up on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade. I built this life. And somewhere along the way, I disappeared from it. You ever walk through your own house and feel like a guest? I passed by the den, the one I once called my room. Now it was a storage unit for things they didn't want in sight. Boxes labeled Dad's old junk. Books unopened. Tools untouched. That night, I made a decision. I called my lawyer. There was a fund. Something I'd built slowly over 35 years of labor. Never glamorous, but solid. A retirement plan, savings, stocks, tied together in one account under my name. And my son's. The original plan was to transfer full access to him by year's end. I had already signed the preliminary documents. But not anymore. I didn't pull it all away. I just added a small clause, one he wouldn't see until it mattered. Access denied until the beneficiary hosts a private memorial dinner honoring the account holder's life and values. Not after my death. No. While I'm alive. Let's see what he remembers when there's something on the table besides wine and insults. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's written in ink, notarized, and buried in paperwork, waiting for the moment someone finally asks, "Why isn't this working?" And trust me, they will ask. Weeks passed. Autumn came. The leaves began falling, quietly, without asking permission. Funny how nature knows when to let go. Meanwhile, my phone stayed silent. No call. No invite. Not even for Thanksgiving. He went on with life, posting photos with his friends at expensive steakhouses, captioned, "Grateful for the real ones." And I made a quiet turkey sandwich. No candles. No carving knife. Just peace. Then came the knock. My neighbor's son, a shy kid from across the street, brought over a slice of pie. "No one should eat alone," he said, with a gentle shrug. That one gesture hit harder than any insult I'd ever received. Because kindness from a stranger feels warmer than cold laughter from your own blood. I started thinking about legacies. What we leave behind when the jokes fade and the table clears. And I remembered something. When my wife passed 10 years ago, I started a scholarship fund in her name. Small, quiet, for single mothers going back to school. I had kept it modest, discreet. But now, I opened the fund. I shifted resources, and I renamed it the Quiet Chair Fund. A nod to every father who showed up, paid the bill, and was forgotten anyway. And I transferred $42,000 from the joint account, the one my son assumed he'd inherit, into that fund. Legally, irrevocably, tied to something bigger than birthday dinners and jokes. He wouldn't notice it. Not yet. But the day he did, he'd understand what it means when the man you mock decides to stop standing in your corner and starts building a legacy without your name on it. Because some chairs stay empty. Not out of loss, but out of choice. The first time he noticed was during a loan application. Apparently, he was trying to buy a new house, something flashier, closer to the water. He needed backing. My backing. That's when he saw it. Joint account access restricted. Funds unavailable. He called me. "Dad, did you change something with the account?" "I can't move anything." I kept my voice calm. "There were some adjustments. Long overdue." He paused. "You said this was for me, that it was already mine and all, but name." "Exactly," I replied. "It was in my name, but not anymore." Click. No apology. No attempt to understand. Just silence. Then disconnection. You see, I've learned something in old age. Some people only see your worth in what they can withdraw from you. Not in your wisdom. Not in your stories. Not even in your presence. Just your wallet. And when it closes, so does their affection. I wasn't punishing him. I was liberating myself. Later that week, I visited a community center on the edge of town. They had leaky ceilings, broken chairs, and a youth counselor with tired eyes. I wrote a check. Not for millions, but enough. Enough to fix the roof. Enough to replace every chair. Enough to give that place warmth for winter. When I handed it to her, she asked, "Who do we thank?" I said, "No need." Then paused. "Actually, just write this, for the ones who paid quietly and were never invited to sit." That same night, my son posted a photo. A long caption about betrayal. About old people acting selfish and burning bridges. I didn't respond. Because the bridge he spoke of, he set fire to it the moment he told me, in front of strangers, to pay and get lost. And now, he'd see how it feels. To be on the wrong side of a bridge you thought would always be there. Christmas came. No invitation. No call. Not even a forwarded text from someone who remembered I used to carve the ham. The same man I had once carried on my shoulders to see the tree lighting downtown. had now built a table with no chair for me. But I had already prepared. That morning, I drove to a small local diner. Quiet, warm. The waitress greeted me like I'd been there 100 times. "You celebrating with family today?" she asked. I looked out the window. Snow was falling like secrets, quiet and heavy. "No," I said. "Just with peace." I brought a wrapped gift, not for my son, but for the busboy. His name was Terry. Barely 19. Been working double shifts. Inside the box, a winter coat and a handwritten note. It read, "Sometimes the people who aren't in your blood keep your heart beating anyway." While others posted their matching pajamas and champagne flutes, I sat with strangers who smiled without needing anything from me. And across town, in his glittering house, my son stared at an empty chair. The one I used to fill. The one he mocked out of the room. A mutual friend told me later. His friends joked less that day. No one laughed the same. It turns out, when the target of the joke leaves the room, the silence doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a mirror. Because who are you when there's no one left to mock? What do you say when your punchlines echo in an empty space? Some tables lose their warmth. Not because the heater broke, but because the heart did. I watched the snowfall outside the diner window, took a sip of my coffee, and whispered to myself, let them miss what they took for granted. Mid-January, a certified envelope arrived at his door. My son, confused, irritated, tore it open like it owed him something. Inside, a simple letter, typed, signed, no emotion. Yet it landed heavier than any speech I could have delivered in person. To my son, this is not a goodbye. It's a rebalancing. For years, I gave in silence. Birthdays, rent, first cars, second chances. All funded without a word. I never asked for applause. Just a little space. A little kindness. But then you said, don't like my friend's jokes? Pay and get lost. So I paid. And I left. Now I've paid forward to causes that need me. To people who see me. To places where laughter doesn't come at the expense of love. The fund is gone. But your chance at becoming a better man still exists. It starts not with a gift, but a dinner. A private dinner. Not with your friends. Not with an audience. Just you. And one chair left open for the man you once mocked. When you're ready to honor that seat, you'll find what you think you lost was never really yours to claim. It was mine to give. Dad, asterisk, asterisk. He didn't post that one online. No rants. No comments. Just silence. That evening, I sat on my porch with a blanket over my knees, watching the last light of day stretch across the frozen lawn. Sometimes, justice isn't in loud victories. It's in the soft unraveling of someone who thought your patience had no end. And my son? He was finally learning what it means to be left off the guest list for something he once thought he owned. Not money, not inheritance, but my presence. And that was worth more than he ever realized. Until it was already gone. It was a Sunday afternoon when the knock finally came. I opened the door to find him standing there. Not with arrogance, but with eyes that had finally learned what absence feels like. No words, just a small, nervous smile. I brought dinner, he said, holding a brown paper bag. Just you and me. I stepped aside. He set the table like he remembered from years ago. 2 plates, 2 glasses, and a quiet air between us. No friends. No jokes. Just the sound of cutlery and the weight of reflection. Halfway through the meal, he finally asked, why didn't you just yell at me that day? I looked him in the eye and said, because silence is the only voice you hear when all your noise disappears. He lowered his head, and that's when I handed him a single envelope. Inside a revised clause. The fund, not restored, but converted. Half now belonged to the Quiet Chair Fund. The other half? Set to activate only after 10 verifiable volunteer dinners. Meals he'd serve not buy. To forgotten elders across the city. Not punishment. Not revenge. Redemption. He looked stunned. Why, he whispered. I smiled faintly. Because forgiveness should cost something. or else you'll never know its value. As he left that evening, I didn't hug him, didn't say, I love you, didn't promise things would go back to how they were. But I watched him walk to his car, a little slower, a little quieter, as if the weight of what he almost lost finally settled in his hands. And me? I sat back down, poured myself a cup of tea, and looked at the empty chair across from me. It no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a reminder that sometimes the greatest justice is letting someone feel the silence they once forced on you.